first of all, thank you, everybody. I know everybody is very busy, and this is something that obviously we're doing because we feel it is key for us to be able to try to understand as much as one can try to understand what is going on and where it came from. And perhaps if we understand where it came from, we can better be able to prevent it from happening again. So just a quick review. Would like to remind everybody again the wonderful saying of Hillel, which is appropriate, and it's very musical in Hebrew. Im ein ani li mili. I think everybody can memorize that. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me, right? And if not now, then when? And if I'm only for myself, who am I? So in that spirit, let's just quickly review the previous issue we discussed. You remember, Vadik, do you want to tell us what you remember from the last book review? I guess you can unmute yourselves. Vadik?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. Well, yeah, no, there was a lot of information. I don't know what to pinpoint, actually, to be honest with you.
What lies, okay. What lies do you remember that we discussed out of the 8-9 lies we discussed? Do you remember any of them?
So sorry, no.
Don't worry, here we go. So I'm gonna just bring up the notes, just a quick reminder of the notes, because you guys all said very important things, and I just didn't want that to be lost on us, because my notes were a little longer than what we discussed. So the first lie was Israel is the cause of Middle East tension because of its refusal to make compromises for peace. If someone tells you that, what were the facts? Do you guys remember? All right, so just you're probably still muted. Okay, so just a few situations. First of all, in 1948, Israel accepted the UN resolution, and the rest of the Arab nations did not. 7 countries attacked us. In 1967, after the 6-day war, Israel wanted to return all the lands back for peace. And the response of the Arab world was the 3 no's of Khartoum: no negotiation, no recognition, no peace with Israel. And then in 1978, they made the Camp David Accords with Carter and with the president of Egypt, and they agreed for peace, and they gave an area that they developed with the oil fields that would have made Israel practically energy independent. They gave Yamit, a wonderful Jewish city that they built right on the sea. They also gave Sharm el-Sheikh that they developed, the hotels, everything. The point was, that's how much the Jews are willing to do for peace. So to say that the Jews are not willing to give area for peace is a complete lie, and we will discuss quickly. It's like many other lies and propaganda and libel that is talked about the Jews. Now, specifically regarding the Palestinians, despite the fact that they never considered themselves as an independent people or part of their own land, they always said, even the head of the PLO we discussed, remember, in 1956, he said in the United Nations that everybody knows that Palestine is simply part of southern Syria. So anyway, and we also talked about the fact that Arafat rejected an offer that was given to him by Ehud Barak in 2000, and in the response to that was that he launched the second Intifada, killing civilians and targeting them with suicide bombers. There was another one in 2008, etc. But the point is, if you're saying that it is desperation that leads the Muslim extremists to kill and to bomb themselves, the answer is you were just given hope, you were given peace. And what did you respond with? You respond with terrorism. So you can't say that it is because Jews are threatening or genociding, etc., because that's completely factless. You guys agree?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, all right. So that was one. The other lie that we said, Israel doesn't need much for the security, and we said it's even smaller than New Jersey, and New Jersey is wider. There's a map that actually overlays Israel and New Jersey, and Israel is even smaller than the state of New Jersey, which is often compared to. Occupies less than 1/600th, so 0.0016 of all the lands occupied by the Arab states. And if you look at Jordan, which was part of the British mandate given by the League of Nations, created in 1918 by President Wilson, if you look at that area that was given, they were given that territory, Jordan and current Israel, to make a land for the Jews. That's why they were given the mandate, because of the Balfour Declaration. They seemed like they were actually leading the path to create a Jewish homeland for the Jews. Now, that's before the Holocaust, right? That's before the Holocaust. So people saying, oh, it was only because of the Holocaust that the Jewish homeland was created. No, it was long in the making, that the idea of Zion, on the river of Babylon, we cried, like the song goes, and as we remembered Zion. So saying Zionism is just a new movement. There was always migrations into Israel, and there were always Jews there throughout the entire time. They were murdered, they were expelled, but they were always there. And it's part of what the Jew is. It's nationhood as well. So those people who are trying to modernize their hate, masking it under the guise of anti-Zionism, are simply either misinformed or are just wolf in sheep's clothes. That's what it is. So that's Israel's willingness to cede more than 97%. Actually, it was like 99% of the land it captured in the war of self-defense is truly remarkable and unparalleled in history. All right, that's that. Israel stole the land from the Palestinians, and we discussed why that is incorrect as well. And we said that Ahmed Shukeri, who was the founder of the PLO in 1956, said that it's common knowledge Palestine is nothing but southern Syria. And we discussed other stuff as well there. Okay. Israel has a moral obligation to allow the Palestinian refugees who fled in 1948 and their descendants to return to Israel. So that's another thing that you often hear when talking to people who are trying to raise the cause of the Palestinian people. What will happen, as we discussed, if that happens, is the destruction of Israel. So, and that's really what they want, and they said it themselves. So let's just quickly, I'll review that. The objective of those who wish to see Arab refugees, and there are several millions. Elechka, you need to mute yourself. I apologize. Descendants go and live in Israel is to destroy Israel. This is the often stated explanation offered by Arab leaders themselves for over half a century. October 1949, just a year after Israel's creation, Egyptian Foreign Minister Salah ad-Din said, "It is well known and understood that the Arabs, in demanding the return of the refugees to Palestine, mean the return as masters of the homeland and not as slaves. With a greater clarity, they mean the liquidation of Israel." 8 years later, 1957, Arab Refugee Conference in Homs, Syria, passed a resolution stating, "Any discussion aimed at the solution of the Palestine problem, which will not be based on ensuring the refugees' right to annihilate Israel, will be regarded as a desecration of the Arab people and an act of treason." 4 years later, Gamal Abdel Nasser, Egypt's president, declared in September 1, 1961, if the refugees return to Israel, Israel will cease to exist. So we don't want to repeat all of that stuff. We discussed that before. And the other thing we discussed, that no other refugee around the world is defined by the United Nations as the Palestinian refugees. They made a different, completely definition for them. Anybody remembers the definition that they made? Basically, there is a definition that separates a refugee from a migrant worker. A migrant worker, anybody who goes to find a job and who lives in that area for less than 2 years. What they said is anybody who lived there for any amount of time and who left is considered a refugee. And still, with all those numbers, we're talking about 250,000 people who fled, and the majority of them, this not because the Israelis threatened them. On the contrary, Ben Gurion said, "Stay there." In the Israeli when he announced the formation of Israel in May 14, 1948, he actually said, "Please stay with us. Let's build the country together for us all." And they fled, many of them, because the Arabs told them, "Please go away, because we're going to go attack and we will annihilate them, throw them into the water, and then you can go and inherit everything that they built, everything that they had there." So, right, that's about that. And if we think about the refugees, the entire problem of the refugees is an issue that was purposefully made by the Arab countries in order to, as Hamas is also doing it, when they're asked, why don't you provide security for the refugees as well? I mean, you build tunnels for yourself. Why not allow the other refugees to go there? It's like, no. The refugees is your problem, the UN problems. We do not care about them. That's what they say themselves. Unlike the Israelis, where about practically 800,000, almost 800,000, I can't remember, 80,000, something like that, Jews had to flee the Arab countries, Morocco, Algeria, had 150,000 people in Algeria. The famous boxer, it's called the boxer of Auschwitz, he came from there, world champion in boxing. Iraq, other countries, 800,000. What happened to them? They all were accepted by Israel, even though Israel didn't really get money from the EU to help them or anywhere else. They accepted them and integrate them into the society. And the fact that they did not want to take the Palestinian refugees, I mean, Jordan took a little bit of them, but then we know about what happened in Black September. In September of 1970, Hussein, the king of Jordan, massacred 4,000 Palestinians, 600 Syrians in a week, and they escaped, ran away into Beirut. At that time was considered the Paris of the Middle East, and unfortunately with Hezbollah and everything, they made it unlivable for many Christians who end up running away. Those who didn't were murdered, and turned the tables around, making the democracy and beauty into a war zone. As we know, Israel is now dealing with the potential war on its northern border with Lebanon. So anyway, that's that. And the other question that we didn't get a chance to get to was about Jerusalem. So some Muslims say, well, Jerusalem is a holy Muslim, as holy to the Muslims as it is to the Jews. And the facts are quite the reverse. So we didn't get to that last time so quickly. Jerusalem is mentioned 667 times in the Bible, not even one time in the Quran. Jerusalem is mentioned in all 3 daily Jewish prayers. Later Islamic teachings, not in the Quran, later Islamic teachings are talking about the ascent of Muhammad in a dream. that was taking place from Jerusalem to heaven on the Burak, which, you know, is defined as a horse or mule, whatever, half mule. And for them, it's only the third holiest site after Mecca and Medina. By the way, of interest, when Muhammad in the 7th century started the Islam, he considered himself as a prophet. He wanted the Jews to convert to Islam. He wanted them to consider him as their last prophet. And he, as a matter of fact, was, as the rest of the Jews, he prayed in the same direction as they did. And he followed the fast of Yom Kippur, like the rest of the Jews. And so later, when he realized that the Jews are not going to follow him, that he changed it to, the Ramadan, month of Ramadan, and the prayers that's pointing towards Mecca. And he said that Abraham and Ismail changed that stone that's in Mecca into a holy place. It used to be a pagan worship place. Anyway, right, so we said Muslims prayed towards Mecca, Jews towards Jerusalem. In the short time Jerusalem was under the Jordanian control, only one Muslim ruler came to visit it. So from 1948, right, till 1967, right, so almost 20 years, only one Muslim ruler came to visit there. So saying that it's as holy to Islam as it is to the Jews is ridiculous. It was the king of Morocco, and that area was neglected. And no one tried to make it their capital, right? So the Palestinian people did not try to make it its capital. Jerusalem was always the capital of Israel from the moment King David conquered it in 1000 BCE. And for 1600 years before Islam was born in Saudi Arabia. Each time there were independent Jewish governments in Israel, Jerusalem was always chosen as its capital. Let's talk about the number of people living there, all right, in Jerusalem. All right, so the population size of Jews versus Muslims in Jerusalem. Jews have been the largest religious group in Jerusalem since at least 1844, when the first generally accurate census was conducted. But they were always present in Jerusalem despite expulsion, genocide by the Crusaders and Muslims, and extreme poverty forced upon them under the high taxes and oppressive, humiliating rules as demis, which means lower class citizens that are not pagan. So Christians and Jews were considered demis by the Muslims, because if you were pagan, you didn't have much choice. You would be just like, chop your head off if you don't want to convert. But if you were a Christian or Muslim, they would humiliate you. You'd be second-class citizen. We'll talk about what that involved. But you couldn't be on a horse. You couldn't go on the right side. You had to go on the left side of the Muslim, because the left side is considered with the devil. A lot of other stuff. I mean, as I said before, in 807, there was a rule that Jews had to wear a yellow belt. That's the precedent to eventually the yellow circle and then the yellow star that the Nazi Germans forced on the Jews. And women had to wear one red and one black shoe. And they also had to have a little bell tied to their shoe or the neck, so they can hear when they come in a conical hat. You can still see drawings of that stuff, which kind of looked weird to me. I didn't understand where it was from. I guess that's the demi, right? So the second-class citizen. At that time of that first census in 1844, Jews outnumbered Muslims by 40%. There were 7,120 Jews to 5,000 Muslims, and were almost twice as large as the Christian community, which is numbered 3,390. In all the years since then, and in 9 succeeding censuses, the Jews have always been the largest group residing here in Jerusalem, rising there, and the majority since 1864. As of 2000, Jerusalem contained 439,600 Jews, almost 197,000 Muslims, and 14,200 Christians. By the way, when we have a wedding, what is reminding us of Jerusalem during the wedding? Every Jewish wedding has that. Let's see if anybody on the Instagram is answering or here, guys.
Breaking of the glass.
Oh, bravo. Excellent. Excellent. Wonderful. That's right. Breaking of the glass, because our happiness cannot be complete, right? And that reminds us until Jerusalem is rebuilt, right? Bet HaMikdash, the temple is being rebuilt. Beautiful. Now, there's another thing that we have to do, and many of us forget to do. One corner of the house or any, even clothing when you're dressed, has to be left undone, whether it is a wonderful meal, something has to be missing, or perhaps like an earring missing. You know, those people wear one earring. No, I'm kidding. They're wearing it for another reason. But the idea is our heart can never be complete without Jerusalem as part of it. So this is really, truly part of our being, part of the Jewish culture. Very good, very good. Also, every year, the fast of the 9th of Av is meant to commemorate the destruction of the first and second temple in Jerusalem. And throughout history, Jews have arranged to have earth from Israel, especially from Jerusalem, poured into their graves when they die. All right, so that was just a quick review of it, and now let's see where was this other thing that I prepared for you guys today. Okay, so going a little bit into back in time, since we had to do those because they were our roadmap to understand that a lot of the things that are being discussed are said to us because they have talking points, but those talking points are truly propaganda. And now we're going to go back and look, where did they get those great ideas of propaganda? Did they come up with it themselves, or they had some help? And when did it really first start? So we're not going to go into biblical times where, you know, we have Egypt, and then, you know, you speak to a rabbi, he'll say, well, the uncle of Jacob, who is renamed Israel, right? Lavan, his name was Lavan, which means white, was the first anti-Semite who tried to steal stuff from Jacob and then tried to kill him. He went after him to kill him with his people, but didn't succeed, right? And then you have Egypt, and then you have others like Amalek. Then you have the Haman in the Megillat Esther, in the Esther's Bible, the book of Esther. But we're going to go now into later time, and we're going to go into pagan time, into the Greek time. So the one basic reason for pagan anti-Semitism at that time was hostility to Judaism, which the pagan world found threatening to many of its most cherished values. So it resonates throughout. This basically, the Jews are a threat because of who they are, just by being Jewish, not because rich or poor, not because nose or ears or whatever you want to say, right? Nearly all the causes and themes of subsequent anti-Semitism were present in the pagan world. But the rise of Judaism's first daughter religion, which was what? Christianity. Very good. Gave birth to new and more frightening expressions of Jew hatred. So let's just quickly, pagan anti-Semitism, first non-Jewish, meaning not recorded in the Bible, record of anti-Semitism was in the 3rd century before the Common Era. And look the propaganda, and it will be following afterwards, even in some of the enlightened, so to say, philosophers. So 3rd century before the Common Era, the name of the guy was Manithos. He was an Egyptian priest living in Alexandria. And although at that time there were many non-Egyptians living in Egypt, in Alexandria, specifically, he didn't like the Jews. Not the other Greeks, but the Jews who were brought in there by Alexander the Great and by later on other kings who brought them there to translate the Jewish Bible into Greek. And so after the Jewish Bible is being translated into Greek, this guy doesn't like the fact that the Jews were slaves and were freed, and they were, their God basically helped free them. So what he says instead is the Jews were evicted because they were all lepers. So you can imagine they had leprosy, right? Very, very weird imagination, but that's what he said. And let's see where it is. Having been upset by the description of the Exodus, he decided to rewrite history and wrote that the Jews did not flee Egypt, but were expelled because they were lepers. This lie will be repeated next by Tacitus around 100 AD, Roman historian, and later Voltaire. For God's sake, Voltaire, 1750s, right? The Enlightenment time, who repeated the same slander. A century later, the libel was repeated in a letter by, I don't know, a non-Jewish Jew, right? So if you think of Soros, well, this is the previous Soros, Karl Marx.
Bernie Sanders.
No. We're talking facts over here for sure. So Karl Marx, right? So Karl Marx, he repeated that same slander. Karl Marx was a grandson of a rabbi, right? His parents converted to Protestantism, and they baptized him. Anyway, other things Jews were accused of were hating all other people. This will be a charge, that will be repeated often in history. And even being atheists. Now, how could you say that Jews will be atheists? I mean, I was like, how can they say that? Well, they say because they worship a God that no one, themselves included, had ever seen, while dismissing all visible gods as false. I love that reasoning. Anyway, another person later on would be Philostratus, and that was around 200 AD. He said, Jews have long been in revolt not only against the Romans, but against humanity, and a race that has made its own life apart and irreconcilable, that cannot share with the rest of mankind in the pleasures of the table, well, because of the kosher food that they have, that Jews have to have, nor join in their libations, meaning the alcohol that they pour for religious offering, or prayers or sacrifice, are separate from ourselves by a greater gulf than divides us from Surah in Iraq or Bactra in Afghanistan of the more distant Indies. Now think to yourself, if Jews stop following the one God, if they listen to the pressure of paganism, right, what would happen? We wouldn't have Christianity, we wouldn't have Islam. Those religions would never have been born. So they, by remaining adherent to their promise to God, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and then we will listen, because it's irrational, right? Na'aseh, you don't usually just act before you know what you're about to do, but they so much were impressed by all the miracles that God made that they said, you know what? We cannot understand everything. We will just do as you say, because you have shown us that you wish us good. So we'll trust you. Like some patients, would tell the doctor, no matter what would you say? I trust you completely, which, as a physician myself or any other physician who respects his patients, this is something that we don't want to hear. But with God, them saying that, there was deep love and understanding, and they kept it throughout the years. And that what brought, like it said in the Bible, you'll be bringing light to other nations. You'll be the priests to bring light to other nations. So they will, have different versions, of their love for monotheism, but it will still be in its pure form, hopefully one that will bring good to humanity. 167 BC, Antiochus Epiphanes is really remembered only by the Jews because of the Maccabees, decided to destroy Judaism, egged by some, unfortunately, assimilated Jews. He realized they do not call him God, manifest, which is what Antiochus Epiphanes means. Epiphanes is God manifest, because of their Judaism, right? They didn't want to bow to him. There's stories about this wonderful mother and her 7 sons who refused to bow, from the oldest to the youngest. With the youngest, he felt kind of pity or just wanted to give him an excuse. He just threw his ring and told him, just pick up the ring, and it will look as if you picked up the ring, so you don't feel bad, but they will not, but in the way you will bow to me. But others will think that you just picked up the ring. He says, oh my God, look how much you're concerned that what others will say. Think about how God will look at that if you're just concerned with picking the ring. And they threw him out of the window too, and they killed him. And the mother also killed herself. Even the accusation of ritual murder, that I didn't realize that later on are part and parcel of the Christian blood libel, and later adopted by the Nazis and the Muslims. That was started by a Greek Hellenized self-made expert. He said that he's an expert writer on the Odyssey and Iliad, and he was living during around 48 CE in Rome. That's about when he died, 45, 48 CE in Rome. Was later proven to make up stories and speak of himself as the greatest writer. Reported that when Antiochus captured, he said that when Antiochus, right, the king we just spoke about, the Greek king, captured the temple, he found a Greek man inside who told him the story of how the Jews tortured and drank the blood of their enemies. And this is, quote, they would kidnap a Greek foreigner, fatten him up for a year, and then convey him to a wood where they slew him, sacrificed his body with their customary ritual, partook of his flesh, and while destroying him with fire, they swore an oath of hostility to all the Greeks. Tacitus, Roman historian we discussed earlier, hated the Jews, saying they regarded as sacred all that we hold profane. So I was curious, like, what is he talking about? Well, listen to this. The Jews, he wrote, regard it as a crime to kill any newborn infant. In contrast, the Romans, like the Greeks before them, killed mentally and physically handicapped infants. To the Roman and the Greek mind, keeping such children alive was pointless and unaesthetic. So the fact that Jews were humane and were going to take the extra burden on themselves of keeping a child that is not what the Romans or Greeks considered perfect, right? They used to fight and compete naked because they're the cult of the human body. So if the person wasn't perfect, imagine probably Gorbachev with his spot would also be not alive, right? So whatever they didn't think was perfect, kaput, history. All right, so let's quickly move into Christian anti-Semitism. All right. So what was really the source of Christian anti-Semitism? What was the reason? You guys want to say what you think was the reason for Christian anti-Semitism? All right. What do you think prompted them to hate the Jews? Vazik? Sophie? Okay, you
I'm
guys
not
want.
sure.
All right, so think to yourself, if we spoke about the pagan world, what did they not like about the Jews? The Jews were simply different. The Jews were different than them, and they did not want to accept what they felt was true. So by the fact that they remained as Jews, they negated whatever the pagans believed in. Now, imagine much more so Judaism, right? Christianity arose from Judaism. Their God was coming from Jews, right? Jesus, although Palestinians say that he was a Palestinian, just like Moses. But the point is, like historical fact, forget about propaganda, right? His message was actually to the Jews. He said himself, I am only bringing the message to the children of Israel. His apostles, his followers, the people who were his students were also Jews. So if the Jews are not following and not believing, just by remaining Jews, they invalidated in a way, or constantly were a reminder, a sore in the eyes of the Christians, right? So by merely remaining Jewish, Jews constituted in the eyes of millions of Christians a living repudiation, of Christ. Consequently, the Christian world dehumanized the Jew, ultimately helping lay the groundwork for the Holocaust, the ultimate consequence of this dehumanization. It was Judaism that introduced God to the Roman world. It was Judaism alone that had opposed paganism for over 1,000 years. And it was Judaism that by the first century of the Common Era counted approximately 1 out of every 10 citizens of the Roman Empire as an adherent. So when in the 4th century Rome chose to replace paganism with monotheism, you would think it would be Judaism, but in fact it was Christianity. Now, why do you think the Romans would choose Christianity as the main religion as opposed to Judaism? Anyone? Why do you think they would choose Christianity over Judaism if they were already 10% in the 1st century of the Roman citizens were Jews? They were actually describing that the Romans would circumcise their children and they would have food that was kosher food. Many of Muhammad's rules about the food, halal, right, is based on the Jewish rules of food, kashrut. So why would they choose Christianity? Elichka, why do you think they would choose Christianity? Zhenya?
It's easier to follow, and it's more convenient, because if you're going to be like discriminated against, then no.
That's a good point, but they were both discriminated against at the beginning. The Christians were being murdered at the beginning before they got protection from the Romans. They became a protected religion. At the beginning, they were considered a sect that they believed would cause potential discord, and they would cause revolts. So that's one of the reasons that John the Baptist was being murdered. The person who was not the teacher, but the person who baptized Jesus Christ, right? And then Jesus Christ baptized others in that manner. Jesus Christ was crucified by the Romans, but how will they tell them that you guys crucified him? You guys are bad, because of you he died. It's much easier to blame the Jews, especially that you want them to adhere to you as opposed to follow the Jews. But you're right, it was easier because, first of all, you can continue eating the pork, so making life much easier. You don't have to change your dietary habit. Also, they said, well, the Messiah came, Jesus Christ came, so you don't have to follow all the 613 laws, right? Because with his death, he took all the sins upon himself, and so all you have to do is just be a believer. You don't have to have circumcision. That sounds scary to people who didn't get circumcised. I mean, I would imagine it would be scary to me also, even though I'm a physician. So that's, if you're an adult having to go through it, doesn't sound fun. And you still can keep your visible God, right? Because you have the Trinity. So you have the God in a human form, not that far from what they were used to in pagan world. So there are a lot of ways that you can say there are compromises that were being made that made it much more appealing. So yes, Sophie, you got it nail on the head, as you said. Now, we're not saying whether they're right or wrong. We're just saying that this was easier. You know, if you have a class that's easier, you know, and you can get an easy A, and you working very hard anyway, you know, I wouldn't blame anyone for taking that class to get an easy A. I mean, who wants to work very hard and then maybe get a B, right? So, all right, let's see. Okay, let's do there. One of the Christians' early bishops that became a saint gave theological justification for violence against Jews. He argued that when Christians beat and murder Jews, it is divinely sanctioned. It was men, say the Jews, who brought these misfortunes upon us, not God. That's quoting him. On the contrary, it was in fact God who brought them about. If you attribute them to men, reflect again that even supposing men had dared, they would not have had the power to accomplish them unless it had been God's will. So what he's saying here is that whatever happens, bad or good, whatever happens, but here he's talking about bad, murdering you, is God's will. So, you know, the book was giving an example. This would be very useful in Nuremberg trials when they tried the Nazi murderers. They would say, well, you know, the Jewish child should have kept his tears away because God is the one who chose for him to be murdered. It wasn't the Germans who were murdering him, it was really God. They were just doing God's work. And I'm like, you know, the idea in Judaism is that we all have a choice, right? That's why we have laws, and we have to try and follow those laws. And it's not easy. Not easy to follow them. If you're a Jew, there are 613 mitzvot, which are mitzvahs, not good deeds. Mitzvah are orders that you have to commit. If you're non-Jew, according to the Jewish religion, you only have to follow the 7 Noahide laws, which are much simpler and less demanding, to be considered righteous and have the opportunity to go into heaven. But right, so in Jewish religion, there is the idea of choice. We all have a choice, and this is why they're telling us the 10 commandments between good and bad. If we didn't have a choice, why would God give us a roadmap how to behave? Anyway, let's look quickly about when Christianity really took place. 1313, Emperor Constantine granted Christianity legal status, so they won't be any more attacked. On his deathbed, his mother actually converted to Christianity, and that was probably the reason. And on his deathbed, he was the first emperor who, you know, got accepted Christianity. In 1380, it was recognized as the state religion by Theodosius I, who was also known as Theodosius the Great. He was around 379, 395 C of the Common Era, who was the last emperor to rule over the United Rome before it split into East and West. So interesting thing, there was in Mesopotamia, there was a bishop who instigated the burning of a Jewish synagogue. And Theodosius the Great said that the church and the people who burnt it have to pay for the construction, the new construction of the synagogue that they have burnt. Well, the Bishop of Milan was very upset, and he said, why did you make them do that? They shouldn't do that. And he ignored his message until he went to a place where he was officiating the Mass in Milan, and that bishop refused to make the Mass until he would rescind the order. Theodosius gave in, And when he did give in, he basically made a precedent with that. And the precedent was that if Christians burn a synagogue, the Jews have to pay to rebuild it. This is what the bishop said to the emperor. There is no adequate cause for such a commotion. Ambrose, that was his name, the bishop, telling Theodosius that the people should be so severely punished for the burning of a building, and much less since it is the burning of a synagogue, a home of unbelief, a house of impiety, a receptacle of folly, which God himself has condemned. By 11th century, all of Europe is converted to Christianity except the Jews. In 1095, the First Crusade begins, and wherever crusaders found Jews, they offered them the choice of Christianity or death. The few who converted by force instead of dying, once they wanted to return to Judaism, were to be disappointed. This prohibition was formalized in a bull issued by Pope Innocent III in September of 1201, where he said, if you converted by force, you had to stick to it, or simply shouldn't have converted, which basically is like, all right, they only were offered death or conversion, so you're saying they should have just died. So you see the complete nonsense of those rules. The Second Crusade made it even worse, 1147. During the decades following the Crusades, new anti-Jewish libels helped lead the murders of hundreds of thousands of Jews. Jews were dehumanized, and millions of Christians were made to believe Jews were allies of devils, his children, and the Antichrist. Thus, even in absence of rational proof, they would only extract information under torture, confession, so to say, right? Since the Jews were considered notoriously tricky, as the agents of the devils are notoriously tricky. So if you can't have a proof, well, don't have to try and make sense. It doesn't make sense to you. They're the agents of the devil. So don't worry about making sense. We told it to you. Just believe us the way we told it to you. So these are the three popular libels that were being formulated by them and present till 1945, and even later on, they will be used. And that's one: Jews murder Christians and drink their blood for ritual purposes. First started in England, that accusation, and then quickly spread around to other countries. Later on, it will be picked up by the Muslims, Saudi Arabia, and Arafat and other Palestinian leaders. The other one was Jews poison Christians. They would say the same thing about Jews poisoning Muslims and causing the AIDS epidemic, injecting it into blacks, and that's the reason of the AIDS epidemic. That was in Chicago, one of the aides to the mayor of Chicago. Jews kidnap the wafer. The wafer is a piece of cracker that is being given. You can see them put under the tongue in mass, and they made kind of a law in the Lateran Council, Fourth Lateran Council, that said that the wafer is not symbolic to the body of Christ, but it's actually it is the body of Christ. But he hides himself because nobody would want to bite the head of a little child or the arms of a little child. So he hides himself, but he's inside that. And so they would say, well, the Jews are poking needles into it because they crucified Jesus Christ once and they want to torture him and crucify him again. I mean, you listen to that stuff right now, and you're like, holy cow. And people actually believe that. But yeah, not only did they believe that, but they acted really crazy stuff based on it. So let's see when it first starts. Unfortunately, it starts by 1144, convert to Christianity, Jewish convert to Christianity. You wonder, why would he do that? Why would he do that? But let me tell you what he did. So a Christian convert from Judaism, Theobald of Cambridge, England, testified that the Jews were required to sacrifice a Christian child annually, the choice of place being made at an annual conference of rabbis. This first accusation of ritual murder had no immediate consequence because no evidence was ever produced that the murder had been committed, let alone a Jewish ritual murder. No Jew was tried for the alleged crime. You may say, okay, big deal. Some self-hating lunatic trying to get attention. since he's not loved by the Jews, and he wants to get attention from his new family. So he goes ahead and sells his previous family. It's happening all the time. Go figure the rationale of those people. They think they're loved. Nobody really loves them. They should realize that. Yes, so that, wait. That was the first case. That was, I moved down a little bit, sorry. That was the first case. That was in 1144. And in 1144, the sheriff found a boy that was knifed in the woods. And, it was during the Crusades there, and that they didn't find any Jew to blame, and they left it alone. They didn't blame the Jews then. But the next one, Hugh of Lincoln, that was in Lincoln, England, was a case when a boy was lost for 3 weeks, and then he was found in a cesspool, and they blamed the Jew. They got this Jewish guy by the name of Apion and tortured him. And under torture, he confessed that they killed him in a manner that they killed Christ. Let me describe to you exactly where it is. And they made him into a saint, Hugh of Lincoln, right? This is a typical example of what would follow, culminating by the Nazis and later picked up by the Islamic world. In 1255, a large number of Jews visited Lincoln, England, to attend the wedding of a prominent Jew's daughter. The day after the wedding, the body of a Christian boy, Hugh of Lincoln, missing over 3 weeks, was found in a cesspool into which he had accidentally fallen. Almost all the Jews of England were invited to the crucifixion. That's what they said. Subsequently, a Jew named Apion was arrested, and under the torture, he confessed that the Jews had crucified the boy in the manner that the Jews had once crucified Jesus. 100 Jews were arrested, and 19, including Apion, were hanged without trial. Generation after generation of Jews in Europe were tortured, and Jewish communities were massacred or dispersed and broken up because of this libel. The blood libel has in fact persisted into contemporary times. The Protestant historian James Parks reported in Central Eastern Europe, among both Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox Christians, there are almost more examples of the accusations in the year between 1880 and 1945 than in the whole of the Middle Ages. So even, like 100 years ago, 150 years ago, there's still a lot of those accusations. In the 1930s, the Nazis often promulgated the libel. The entire May 1st issue, 1934. So 1933, if you remember, Hitler becomes the counselor through the democratic elections. He later on becomes an autocrat. He takes over, no democracy. Of the newspaper, Der Strumer was devoted to Jewish ritual murder. And the regular weekly edition of the paper routinely carried illustrations of rabbis sucking the blood of German children. In the 1960s and 70s, this was promulgated in the Arab world. For example, King Faisal of Saudi Arabia spoke to newspaper interviewers that the Jews murder non-Jews and consume their blood as part of their Passover holiday, specifically Arab children, he said. So there is something that Echad Ha'am, who was a famous writer, a philosopher, Zionist, who lived, was born in Ukraine and moved to live in Israel and died, I think, 1927. He said there's something that is that we can learn, and something you can say almost beneficial that the Jews have learned from this blood libel. So you think to yourself, what could be positive from the blood libel? Anyone? What could one? How could one find any positive thing from such an accusation? Do you imagine something that could be positive from this accusation, guys? All right, while you're thinking about that, let me just read to you something. Two ironic points are worthy of note about this blood libel, right? First, the blood libel was directed against the first nation in history to outlaw human sacrifice, right? In Genesis 22, the binding of Isaac, where God tells him, please don't go ahead and kill him. This was his 10th test, and he instead sacrifices the ram, right? And that's why we do blow, one of the reasons we blow the shofar. Deuteronomy 18:10 also, it says, when you enter the land, do not learn from the abhorrent customs of the inhabitants, and don't put your son or daughter to the fire, right? And it's the only nation in ancient Near East to prohibit the consumption of blood. And it's multiple times in the Tanakh, in the, if you want to call the Old Testament, in the Bible, in the 5 books of Moses, that this is said. So in Leviticus 3:17, it says, it is a law for all time, throughout the ages, in all your settlements. You must not eat any blood. Another 7:26 Leviticus, and you must not consume any blood in any of your settlements. Another one, 17, if any of the house of Israel or of the stranger who resides among them partakes of any blood, I will set my face against that person, and I will cut him off from among his kin. Deuteronomy 12:15-16, you must not partake of the blood, you shall pour it out on the ground like water. Another one, explained why you don't do it, because it's basically part of the life of the animal. Go and if you listen, if you follow this, then all will go, and I'm quoting, go well with you and with your descendants to come, for you will be doing what is right in the sight of the Lord. So you think to yourself, anyone who is Jewish knows that we don't drink for Passover blood. We don't drink blood, period. Even if there is an egg that you're breaking and you have to make it into an omelet and it has an egg in it, it becomes not kosher. You cannot do that. So what the Echad Ha'am was saying, that when you're asking yourself a question, and this is really one of the things that makes, I believe, Jews stronger, is that how can the whole world be wrong and the Jews right? How can it be? That's impossible. It must be that if they're hated, if they're saying that they drink the blood, it must be right. Well, any Jew who knows anything about Judaism knows that what we just discussed, right? I mean, you read every year the same book, the same stuff. So that proves to you, yes, the answer is yes, all the world could be wrong and you could be right. And that helps us in other fields as well. So if we are convinced that we're doing something right, that we're on the right path, we are able to and willing to take the risk and follow our intuition, follow our dream, follow our mind, follow our thoughts without worrying, because we are a nation that knows, unfortunately, how to live alone among other nations. All right. There are 2 more libels I'm going to go through. We're almost out of time. We are out of time, 9:16. Do you guys want to finish, or do you want me to go quickly on the other stuff? You want me to finish, or we want to go to the other stuff, guys?
You can finish. Finish, yeah, please.
No, you want me to continue, or you want me to end the
No, continue. You have a couple more, and that's it. Continue, please.
Okay, so so we discussed about the blood libel, and we said that how it actually made us stronger. The other libel that we know, oh, why don't you tell me, Zina, what other libels do you know that they claim that the Jews do? Besides, I mean, we did mention it, besides the drinking of the blood, especially Passover, they used to do pogroms in Russia all the time.
Sorry, don't know.
Well, you do know. Think about Stalin. What was Stalin's 1953? What was the claim that he said about the Jewish doctors?
Hmm.
Remember that they wanted to poison
Oh,
communist leaders.
yes.
Right. So he died 3 days before the courts took place, but he had a chance to torture a lot of people in the process. So that's the idea that Jews want to poison others. And this was actually said even in the United States. 1988, Steve Coakley, the aide to Mayor Eugene Sawyer, said that the AIDS epidemic is a result of doctors, especially Jewish ones, who inject AIDS into blacks. He sent that as a letter to Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan. Ambassador Nabil Ramlawi, the permanent observer of Palestine to the UN Commission on Human Rights, testified in 1997, guys, okay, to the United Nations in Geneva that the Israeli authorities have infected by injection 300 Palestinian children with the HIV virus. And it's like, holy cow. I mean, first of all, you wonder, like, why did they decide 300? Why already, if you're going there, they have a party, it's like 1,000. Why 300? You don't have more children than 300? I mean, like, everything here is just like, whatever. It's just, but you can see where they're getting it from, but they're just internalizing, making it their own. So let's go a little bit back in history. 1610, medical faculty, University of Vienna, declared that the Jewish physicians were bound by Jewish law to kill every 10th Christian through the use of drugs. Martin Luther, the person who led to the Protestant Reformation with his 95 laws, 95 thesis points that he said against Catholicism, German professor of theology, said that if they, the Jews, could kill us all, they would gladly do so. Aye, and often do it, especially those who profess to be physicians. They know all that is known about medicine in Germany. They can give poison to a man of which he will die in an hour, or in 10 or 20 years. They thoroughly understand this art. Can you imagine? And this is, by the way, this guy, when he first came, he was hoping that by pushing away Catholicism and by pointing why it's making, why it is not right in humiliating the Jews, he would be able to get Jews to adhere to his form, a new form of religion. But when he saw that the Jews did not follow his path, did not follow his religion, the same thing happened, just like with Muhammad. He went virulently against them, but his writings were present as opposed to Muhammad's, which not as bad. They're humiliated. He said, "We'll humiliate them as demis," but he didn't say murder them, which you can see. He said basically burn their house of worship, don't let them teach rabbis, take them out of their professions, etc., etc. Many of the stuff that Hitler followed, and we'll hopefully get around to going through that as well. September 9, 1348 in Switzerland, under the torture, a Jew confessed to poisoning the wells. This is during the Black Plague. The verdict was killing all the Jews. This is Switzerland, killing all the Jews and converting the children under the age of 7. So everybody over the age of 7, they said, is guilty, and so they should be murdered. And they were all the community there was murdered, and the kids under the age of 7 was baptized and raised as Christians after their parents were killed, murdered. Post-desecration, that's the third one. So we talked about that, about the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215. They accepted the wafer used in the church mass changes into Jesus' body, not as a symbolic representation of Jesus, but as his actual body. Less than 30 years later, 28 years later, if it was now with the BBC and the New York Times, it will be in a flash, right, in an instant, right? The Hamas says the Israelis bombed the hospital and killed 500 Jews, and right away there were riots against the Jews. So if it was back then, it will be much faster. But it took 28 years, and in 1243, the first accusation of host desecration occurred in Berlitz, near Berlin. The city's entire Jewish community was burned alive for allegedly torturing a wafer. 1389, the Jewish community was collectively accused of attacking a monk carrying a wafer. Large mobs of Christians surrounded the Jewish neighborhood, offered them the choice, baptize or die. All 3,000 Jews were murdered. They didn't want to be baptized. 1510, 26 Jews murdered, two Jews beheaded. Again, presumed host desecration. And the last one was in 1836 in Romania, but I couldn't find exactly what happened there in terms of what was the consequence of that. Holocaust connection with Christian anti-Semitism. Christianity did not create the Holocaust. Indeed, Nazism was anti-Christian, but it made it possible. Without Christian anti-Semitism, the Holocaust would have been inconceivable. Unlike Christianity, though, Nazism did not call for conversion or suffering of the Jews, but the death of all Jews. Hitler and the Nazis found in medieval Catholic anti-Jewish legislation a model for their own, and they read and reprinted Martin Luther's virulently anti-Semitic writings. Though anti-Christian in large part because of Christianity's Jewish roots and values, the Nazis filled their speeches and journals with stories of Jews murdering non-Jews to drink their blood, and of Jews poisoning Germany's water. An example showing the care between Christian and Nazi laws. There were actually, you can see there was a huge parallel, and in the book they're showing you the parallel between laws that were done during Christianity in the years from 400 to 1900, right? So practically 1500, 1600 years, forgive me. You can see the parallels between that and the rules that the Nazis imposed, and they had all that they were just basically following. Julius Streicher was a teacher and the founder and publisher of the virulent anti-Semitic newspaper we mentioned earlier, Der Strömer. He also was the organizer of the one-day boycott, reminds you of the BDS, right? Boycott of Jewish businesses on April 1st, 1933. And no, that was not Fool's Day. Argued in his defense at the Nuremberg trials that he had never said anything about the Jews that Martin Luther had not said 400 years earlier. In conversation as early as 1918, Hitler said, Luther was a great man, a giant. With one blow, he heralded the new dawn. He saw the Jews as we are only beginning to see him today. Anyway, having reviewed the history today, as the book authors rightly conclude, Christians and Jews should forge an alliance against anti-Semitism that is practiced and spread by the left extremists, the right extremists, the Nazis, and Muslim extremism and anti-Semitism. And to end on a positive note, which we should, Pope John the 23rd, shortly before his death, composed this prayer, and we'll end with that. We realize now that many, many centuries of blindness have dimmed our eyes, so that we no longer see the beauty of thy chosen people, and no longer recognize in their faces the features of our firstborn brother. We realize that our brows are branded with the mark of Cain. Centuries long has Abel lain in blood and tears because we had forgotten thy love. Forgive us the curse which we unjustly laid on the name of the Jews. Forgive us that, with our curse, we crucified thee a second time. And it reminds us the values that make America our country, the country that everybody wants to come to. And it is the pillars that are based on the Judeo-Christian values. And in order to have those pillars protected, cherished, we have to fight. As we often hear, freedom is not free. We forget it. We are enjoying ourselves for a long time without having to fight for it. But now it's the time for it to be fought for, because it starts with the Jews, but it never ends with the Jews. It's kind of like Jews are often said to be like the cannery of the miners, right? It starts with the burning of the books of the Jews, and then it ends up burning of other books, and ends up with trying to destroy our society and our freedom. So I hope, despite the fact that we're all busy, we will make the time to not complain, but to fight for our freedoms. And I know that many of you are going to join us in the march on November 14th, Tuesday at 1 p.m. in Washington.
Yeah, unfortunately, not as many as we would like. A lot of people not going for some reason, but
well, maybe they will change their mind. I do hope so, because thank you, Vazik.
too. Mm-hmm.
Yes, because this is really the time. I think if we want to make a statement, we have to have a lot of people. If it's going to be a small showing, that will mean that it's not important enough for us to unite around it.
Plus, when they had the pro-Palestinian rally in Washington, they had 300,000 people there. So the way, I guess, what makes sense is to go up there is everything works based on politics, based on votes. So when they see the number of people, they know how many votes they can get if they help those people. So we have to come up there with, I guess, a lot more than 300,000 to make a statement.
I agree.
300,000, yeah.
No. I think we need to be there a million people.
Well,
I think,
it was 300,000 of them, so we have to, maybe double that.
Yeah, we have to do something big, and I am very, very fortunate to tell you guys that a lot of people from our office have chosen to go there. And
that's amazing,
and people who are realizing the risk of not going, and those are people who are, have families, have responsibilities, have children, little ones, and yet they're going because they believe it's important for them. And there's, God forbid, no pressure or no extra bonuses or whatever values that I'm offering for them, but they just, I guess, they understand how important it is for us, because if we, I told them.
No, absolutely, no, definitely.
And Vazik, I'm very, very impressed that you're going. I mean, not that I'm surprised, but I'm very grateful, because I know how hard it is.
No, it's difficult. I'm working. My wife is working. She's rescheduled all her patients. It's not easy, but it's something that needs to be done. Because, like, a lot of people, I'm just surprised that they have the same beliefs we do, but they don't want to go. They're saying it's not going to change anything. But that's what happened in Germany and Austria in the 1930s, where a lot of Jewish people, they thought, oh, we'll keep quiet, we're not going to get involved, and nothing's going to impact us, until they all got impacted. That's why we have to work as a team, bond as one, and all have to go to things like this.
You're 100%
Hey,
correct.
I'm also, I closed my office, so I'm going as well.
I just dropped my jaw, Gina.
Yeah, we saw that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I had the same expression. I had the same expression when I found out.
Oh, I know.
I just found out now. You got me online. Wow, Gina, I love you. Well, I love you anyway.
You guys convinced me. You guys convinced me. You're right.
But let me lift off my hat, Yarmulke. Oh my God, I'm so impressed. Wow.
So tell Lenочka.
Oh, she'll be so happy. Oh gosh. Wow. Where's the champion? Is he coming too?
I wish. No, because Mitchell has a test on Tuesday and Alan cannot miss. I wish. But
oh my God, we need him
I'll
as
be
the
there
bodyguard.
cheering for everybody.
And Oleg is going to a pro-Russian rally.
Yeah, he's a gentle giant. All right. Well, guys, question is, was this useful? I know everybody's busy and you guys don't have time to read it, so I'm trying to do the best that I can to summarize it. Honestly, I was very stressed out for today, as I was the last time as well, Jen, I can tell you. So was it useful?
You're better than any audiobooks, honestly.
No, no, it is very useful.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay,
very interesting.
so I did make the notes. Well, it's my pleasure, my
I
honor.
just feel
actually.
bad I don't have time to read it, to be honest.
Don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. You know, the idea is we need to do it together, and you know you can't.
Well, my wife says, don't rub your eyes.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Adelina. Thank you. So, spoken like a true ophthalmologist. All right. The idea is that we have to help one another. It's you know, we're one, and it's kind of like one arm and another arm. You know, one hand cannot do everything. So by helping each other, each of us doing what they can do best, we're able to grow together as a community, as a nation, as humans. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you. You actually stimulate me and make me want to learn more, so I can share the information with you, and we can all grow together.
Oh, thank you for all that knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's the book. It's really great. They spent more than 7 years on the first edition, and then they had, unfortunately, such high demand that they had 3 editions done after that. Last one was, I believe, 2016. So, but I did make notes so that I can share it with you guys. The notes are much more involved than what I gave you, and I did add 2 things that were in the book, because in the book sometimes it's really just straight to the points. I made some background research, as with the first book review that we did, and the second one. I think the next time, what I wanted to do, which I didn't get a chance to do today, was to talk about anti-Semitism during the Islamic period, because I can hear now in a lot of the videos that I see, some Muslims claim that Jews were protected people according to the Quran, which is not really the case. They're considered as I told you, as demis, lower class citizen. In Yemen, as a matter of fact, a place where there was really no European influence, you can see much better the effect of Islam on Judaism. There was a custom they call an ada, which is a religious custom, to pelt Jews with stones and make them clean the sewers. They also had to be dressed like paupers all the time. So when the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, came over, I think it was 1872, something like that, to Yemen, and they told them, they were under Turkish control, they told them, stop doing that, you know, because they actually treated Jews respectfully. They said, oh, we can't, because this is an ada, this is a religious custom, and the Turks' rule was not to interfere with any religious customs. So we will talk about that hopefully next time, if you guys want to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Also,
thank you.
yeah, I guess I don't know if they mentioned it in the book or not. When we were in Prague, it was interesting. We found out it was one day where they gathered all the Jewish men into the synagogue. I forgot the name of it. Now it's called, I believe, Synagogue of Blood or something. And they killed all the men there because they were saying that the men or the Jews spread all that plague. That was a bubonic
Black.
plague. Yeah, I'm not sure which one it was.
Okay.
So it was like the biggest, I guess, murder of the Jewish men in one day. I don't know if they mentioned it in that book or not.
No, they did not mention that in the book. No, they did not mention that. Yeah, there were a lot of occasions all the time. Jews were blamed for that. When the Mongols attacked the Christian world, you know, they end up forming the Ottoman Empire. When they attacked the Christian world, the Christians claimed that these were the 10 lost tribes of the Jews coming to punish the Christians for their treatment of the Jews. And so what they do, they killed more Jews. So that was yeah. Anyway, yeah. We'll talk about that, I guess, next time, and I'm so excited. So we'll talk details, Zina, where you're going, how you're going, and looking forward to that. Oleg
I'll
is
see you
coming
on
too.
Saturday. I'll see you on Saturday.
Even better. Oleg is coming too.
Yeah, I wish. No, he can't.
I
Again, I
understand.
dropped my
He's going
jaw.
to a pro-Russian
I'll
rally
be
that day.
I'll be representing the whole family, but I'll be very loud.
Well, you're always representing with your heart. You wear your heart on your sleeve, as they say.
Yeah, thank you, Yanka. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys. Love you.
Bye,
Thank you.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening. Yeah, thank
You
you
too.
again.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, Sophie. Bye, Zhenya.